More minutes, so I'm going to pass you a sheet of paper. We're going to take 3 questions very quickly, and Dr. Gordis is going to write them down, and answer them all at once, and then we're going to let you go home to your family. So,
okay, my family's on.
Okay. Let's go.
Corey always gets sidelined.
I know. I'm going back to Corey right now. Corey, Noah, and Josh.
Okay, so I feel like your response to Adam's question is another question, which is that...
Was Adam?
That was Adam.
Hi, Adam.
Hi.
That was my original question, by the way. But, like I said, I feel like it's another question. I want to know if there is anything... Look, I agree with you that historically and politically, the state of Israel is justified very clearly. But is there anything that we can bring to the international community that does not have to do with Jewish culture, with Jewish peoplehood, with Jewish continuity, that that could justify the state of Israel in their minds? And also, do we even need to do that? I mean, the one thing that Martin Peretz has ever said that I disagree with is in the Republic.
The one thing
is that we don't need to do that. We only need to legitimize the state to the extent that it can still exist. This is what he says. And I personally, and there are other people who feel that we have to, in order to win the intellectual warfare and also the actual warfare, that we have to legitimize it in other ways.
Okay.
Noah.
2 comments that I don't want you to respond to, just
Fantastic.
observations. Yeah,
Okay.
so you don't have to worry about that. The first is that I actually think last year's war was much better than I'd ever seen it.
Agreed.
And I think that Miri Eisen and Dory Gold and Mark Regev and actual people who know how to speak English were very effective on the news, so that was a good thing to see.
I agree about some of those. Okay.
I was at ROI, so
getting the points across that needed to be across on that. And you mentioned the 2 extremes of the Jewish communities, the Jew C versus the
Kiryas
Yoel and the Neturei Karta types, and you said they choose to disengage from the world, so to speak. And my reaction to that is if only that were true. If only they actually did shut themselves off from the rest of the world, but it's in fact much more serious than that because they are on PA payroll as Minister of Jewish Affairs.
You're talking about Neturei Karta. I didn't mention that.
All right, but...
No, but Kiryas Yoel guys are not on PA payroll, and people in Brooklyn and people in Meashrim are not on PA payroll.
Right.
I left the Neturei Karta out because they're just sick people. They don't even deserve mentions, my
And that's why I'm not a professor. I'm not as nuanced as I should be.
You can work in England.
That was it.
Okay. Finally, Josh.
So let's say we don't blow ourselves up. That's a big suppose. By we, I mean humanity. My mom always told me, and anytime I say, 20 years from now, I say, well, what, you assume we're going to be here in 20 years?
Yeah, okay.
And the population of the minority in Israel continues to increase at 30%, 40%, 50% in not so many generations.
Right.
And further, if we take in the Darfur refugees, as you seem to be advocating, which will further, which will increase that. Well, there's a lot more than a couple of thousand Darfur refugees.
Fine. Okay.
I'm not advocating against it. I'm just commenting.
Right.
And if you see that's happening, and if you assume that that's bad, what's the point? Why should we even try for the next couple of generations? Because the state of Israel is going to be gone anyways.
Okay. Hopefully we'll all be dead by then. But all right. Let me start with you and then I'll end with Corey. I don't believe for a second that the state of Israel has to be gone by then. I don't think that the Darfur refugees, Darfur refugees have to mean this end of the state of Israel, even if a lot of them come in.
There was just a little bit of icing. We're talking
you
about
mentioned them.
the percentage.
I take you seriously, so you mentioned them. I come to them. But let's stick with your major one, I think, is the Arab minority. The Arab minority is an enormous problem. All right, so just to give you some ideas. All right, first of all, not every democracy in the world works the same way. We don't have time to go into this great length now, but the American form of liberal democracy, one person, one vote, on all issues, is not the only model of democracy out there. There's a thing, for example, called ethnic democracy, which exists in other countries, not necessarily countries that we want to emulate, but it exists out there, in which there is a certain ethnicity which on issues of national definition vote where others don't. Everybody gets the same basic human rights: education, healthcare, protection, civil liberties, freedom of the press, whatever. But when it comes to defining language, religion, culture, etc., 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 the ethnicity for which that country is created votes and others don't. That's the kind of ethnicity. It's not the American pure democracy, maybe that or some version of that Israel has to look at. That's one possibility. Okay? Another possibility. Israel has to do everything that it can to maintain a dramatic Jewish majority in this country. It's clear to me. I would agree with you that if Israel does not maintain a numeric majority, it's a big problem. So it has to do that. So it has to do that in a number of ways. First of all, Aliyah makes a big difference. Okay? It just makes a difference. That's number one. Number two, we ought to invest a ton in Arab education, because every study shows that the higher the education level, the lower the birth rate.
Our education of the women in
Okay.
particular.
Oh, okay. But I would educate the women. Actually, it's a novel notion, but I would educate the women. Right? I would even let them in school. Yeah, I would. Yeah, right. But you're right. So so then they'll have 2 kids like we have. So we ought to do everything that we can, not the way the Chinese have done it, but we ought to limit the Arab birth rate by educating them as fast and as well as we possibly can. It will make a difference. Number 3. Here we get a little more. We'll keep going out the outrageous branch here. There are parts of Israel's geography which are much more heavily Arab than others. For example, Wadi Ara, where Al-Fahim is, and other sorts of places, which are in that little triangle on the east side of the country, in the lower part of the Galilee, where the 65 highway is. About, I think, a third of Israel's Arabs live there. Now, let's say a Palestinian state's created. We're clearly keeping Ma'ale Adumim, we're clearly keeping Gush Etzion, we're clearly keeping a whole bunch of areas, right? There's a lot of Jews live there. And they said also, what are you going to give us in return? Well, how about Wadi Ara? Now, it's not transfer, because nobody gets moved out of their house. Nobody gets moved out of their neighborhood. The line moves. And it happened all across Europe, all throughout the 20th century. You woke up one day, you were in Poland, the next day you weren't in Poland. Your house was in the same thing, the line moved. It happened all over. Now, they're not going to like it. No, they're not going to like it. But you know what? A lot of things I don't like either. I would like not to have to share the old city. But I'm probably going to have to share the old city. Now, I admit that I live in Baka. I'm not going to get affected by this. I grant you, major national movements, major developments of countries always have people who pay a price. These people, and there's an issue. Maybe they wouldn't lose their Israeli citizenship, but they wouldn't be able to pass it on to their children. There's all sorts of theories that have been bounded about out there. But maybe what Israel has to do, at least as a stopgap measure at the beginning, is to get rid of that part of the territory, which is almost exclusively Arab, and we have to move the Jews who are there out. There's a few, but not many. And it would give that to an emerging Palestinian state. Without moving anybody out of their house, it's not transfer, it's not ethnic cleansing. It's been happening all across Europe in the 20th century. That would buy us some significant time. It's the most radicalized population, it's the least educated population, and obviously it's adjacent to to what will obviously be where Palestine is if it emerges. So a combination of thinking about what form of democracy to take, doing everything we can to lower the Arab birth rate, increasing Aliyah, and perhaps getting rid of some of those territories is 4 shots that especially if you use them all in various ways, shape, manners, and forms, I think you could for sure throw a huge question mark on the certainty with which you say in 20 or 30 or 40 years Israel's not going to be here anyway.
I said several generations, kind of why I defined generation. You left number 5 out, which you already mentioned, which was funding Viagra, but that's...
Viagra doesn't increase fertility, it increases potency, but we'll have a conversation separate time. Okay? Those people who need Viagra are not having children anymore. But